Let's talk about a fascinating glitch in our social programming, a psychological tripwire that makes us feel completely exposed, when in reality, almost nobody notices a thing.
Okay, you know the feeling. You're about to give a presentation. Your heart is hammering against your ribs, your palms are slick with sweat, and you are just convinced that every single person in the room can see right through you, that they can practically hear your heart thumping from the cheap seats. Sound familiar?
Well, that sensation of being trapped under this intense, invisible spotlight, where you're sure all your inner chaos is on full public display, it's an incredibly common human experience. So let's get into why we feel so darn exposed.
And here's the good news. Psychology actually has a name for this. And even better, just understanding what it is the first giant leap to overcoming it.
It's called the illusion of transparency. And really, it's all about the massive disconnect between the hurricane of emotions we feel on the inside and what people actually see on the outside.
So here's the key. It's a cognitive bias. It's a trick our brain plays on us. It makes us believe that our internal state, our anxiety, our excitement, even when we're trying to lie, is just leaking out of us and is way more obvious to everyone else than it really is.
And you know, this illusion is a two-way street. We think we're an open book to other people, and we think we're amazing mind readers who can tell exactly what they're feeling. It's like we're all walking around in these private, soundproof bubbles, but we mistakenly think they're made of crystal clear glass.
Now, to really wrap your head around how deep this disconnect goes, you've got to look at this one brilliantly simple experiment that just makes the whole thing crystal clear.
It comes from a PhD student at Stanford, Elizabeth Newton. She designed what's now famously known as the Tapper Listener Test. And it's so simple you could literally do it right now at your desk.
Okay, here's how it worked. One person, called the Tapper, picks a super famous song, think Happy Birthday or Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, and taps out the rhythm on a table. The other person, the listener, just has to guess the song. But before they guess, the Tapper has to predict how often the listener will get it right.
So what do you think the Tappers predicted? Well, they were pretty confident. On average, they estimated that the listeners would nail the song about 50% of the time. You know, 1 out of every 2 tries. Seems pretty reasonable, right?
Yeah, not even close. The actual success rate was a jaw-droppingly low 3%. Just 3. We're talking about a massive canyon-sized gap between what the Tappers expected and what actually happened.
So why the huge gap? Well, this is the core of the illusion right here. For the person tapping, the experience is incredibly rich. They're hearing the entire song in their head, the lyrics, the melody, the instruments, the whole shebang. But all the listener gets is a series of disconnected taps. The tapper is so immersed in their own experience, they can't imagine that the music isn't obvious.
So how does this all play out in the real world? I mean, this isn't just about tapping songs on a table. This cognitive bias has some very real and sometimes very serious consequences for all of us.
Let's circle back to that public speaking nightmare. You feel nervous, so you automatically assume everyone can see it. Then you try to compensate. Maybe you grip the podium a little tighter, and you feel like that's glaringly obvious too. It creates this vicious feedback loop where your stress just keeps climbing, all based on a feeling that isn't real.
But the stakes can actually be much, much higher. The illusion of transparency is thought to be one of the key psychological drivers behind a much darker social phenomenon.
You've probably heard of the bystander effect. It's the chilling idea that the more people who witness an emergency, the less likely it is that any one of them will help. And the illusion of transparency is a major culprit. See, everyone feels that internal sense of alarm, but they assume that if it were a real emergency, their alarm would be obvious and they'd see that same alarm on everyone else's faces.
This quote from the researchers just nails it. We feel that internal panic, but we try to play it cool on the outside while we scan the room to see how others are reacting. But since everyone else is doing the exact same thing, the entire group looks calm. And so everyone collectively concludes, often incorrectly, that there's no real danger. Our internal state is totally hidden.
Okay, so if this illusion is so powerful and potentially even dangerous, what on earth can we do about it? Well, it turns out the solution is actually kind of amazing in its simplicity. The researchers Kenneth Savitsky and Thomas Gilovich decided to go back to that public speaking scenario. They wanted to test a very simple intervention. Could just knowing about the illusion of transparency actually help people? So they divided people into 3 groups before they had to give a speech. The control group, they got no special instructions. The reassured group was told the usual stuff. You know, it's normal to be nervous, don't worry. But the informed group, they were specifically taught about the illusion of transparency, and the results were astounding.
The informed group not only rated themselves as less anxious and their speeches as better, but independent observers agreed. They actually were better speakers.
So why? What happened? It's because understanding that their nervousness was largely invisible to the audience shattered that anxiety feedback loop we talked about. They were freed from the crushing pressure of trying to manage an emotion that nobody else could really see in the first place.
And that really is the powerful, crucial takeaway here. The simple act of knowing this cognitive bias exists is the most effective tool for taking it apart. The full orchestra of your anxiety might be blasting in your head, but to everyone else, it's just a few quiet taps.
So the next time you're feeling that invisible spotlight, the next time you feel like your anxiety is on display for the whole world, just remember the tapping test. Remember that you are far more opaque than you feel. And ask yourself, now that you know that, what fear might you finally be willing to face?